The Star Wars franchise is such a gargantuan beast of an IP that it's basically impossible for everyone to know every single thing about it. All the same, sometimes fans en masse end up missing the mark on a scene for one reason or another, whether due to bad filmmaking, audiences not paying enough attention, or an unfortunate combination of the two, resulting in half-truths and flat-out misinformation being held up as fact among the fandom. And that's certainly true of the following 10 Star Wars scenes, which, despite mostly ranking among the more distinctive moments from their respective movies, have all been wildly misinterpreted by a vast swath of the fanbase. Now, you're still free to prefer your own interpretation, of course, as long as you remember that it's not technically correct. So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture Star Wars, and here are 10 Star Wars scenes everyone gets wrong. Number 10. Balance to the Force isn't a numbers game. Let's kick things off with one of the single most misinterpreted aspects of Star Wars lore. That bringing balance to the Force isn't, contrary to popular opinion, a simple numbers game. This is to say, the Force isn't in balance when there are 2 Jedi and 2 Sith. Despite what some fans might think, the Force definitely isn't in balance at the end of the prequels simply because we have Obi-Wan and Yoda on one side, and Anakin and Palpatine on the other. The mere existence of the Sith is imbalance, with George Lucas himself even referring to them as a cancer which needs to be removed in order to achieve balance. The dark side of the Force can never die, but the Sith who indulge in it absolutely can. And only when the Jedi prevail over the Sith and the dark side is kept at bay can true balance be realized. Number 9. The Stormtroopers were ordered to miss. Even the most casual Star Wars fan is well aware of the enduring trope that the Stormtroopers are apparently terrible marksmen who can't hit anything to save their lives, and their inability to hit the heroes during their escape from the Death Star in A New Hope is often cited as a prime indication of their incompetence. Yet this completely ignores the fact that the Stormtroopers were very clearly ordered to miss Luke, Leia, and Han during their exit. This is bafflingly missed by many fans, despite Leia literally saying out loud, "They let us go, it's the only explanation for the ease of our escape, they're tracking us." Grand Moff Tarkin says to Darth Vader, "You're sure the homing beacon is secure aboard their ship? There really would have been nowhere to go had the Stormtroopers wounded or killed the heroes. The plan was always to shoot wide, let them escape, and then learn the location of the rebel base on Yavin 4. Basically, of course they were ordered to miss. They weren't just crap." Number 8. Kill the past isn't The Last Jedi's goal. It's fair to say that The Last Jedi broke a good portion of the Star Wars fandom, or at least that's one way of putting it. And though many fans actually had totally reasoned criticisms of Rian Johnson's divisive sequel, much of the ire stemmed from a patent misinterpretation of the movie's themes. To many, Kylo Ren's memorable one-liner about the past, "Let the past die, kill it if you have to," was seen to represent Johnson's own designs on the Star Wars franchise. That he wanted to kill the series' past by subverting audience expectations, and then quite literally killing Luke Skywalker at the end. But first and foremost, it's important to remember that Kylo Ren is a card-carrying villain. So why would any filmmaker let an antagonistic figure become the mouthpiece for the movie's big message? It doesn't make sense. Did Johnson want to ditch the dustier, more unearned sentimentality of prior Star Wars movies and do something a bit different? Absolutely. But if you pay much attention to the film at all, it's very clearly about embracing and learning from the past. Yoda even memorably tells Luke the greatest teacher failure is. Listen to the legend. Number 7. Jedi can't marry, but they can have sex. Attack of the Clones introduced the notion that Anakin's romance with Padme was strictly forbidden, with Padme pointing out that Jedi aren't allowed to marry. This led many fans to assume that Jedi aren't allowed to have romantic entanglements of any kind, and that they're basically functionally celibate. Yet this isn't true at all, and Anakin straight up says it in the movie himself, noting that attachment and possession are what is forbidden by the Jedi Order. However, the Order never said anything about casual romantic relationships with a healthy amount of emotional distance, and certainly not one-night stands. George Lucas confirmed as much to be true in a 2002 CNN interview, reiterating that celibacy isn't something the Jedi are policing. Rather, it's the more emotionally involved relationships which are forbidden, where a Jedi could potentially be lured to the dark side to protect it. Case in point, Anakin. Number 6. C-3PO's right leg was silver in the original trilogy. Now here's something so many people get wrong about the original trilogy that it's basically become a Mandela effect phenomenon phenomenon in its own right on social media. If you confidently assert that C-3PO is colored entirely gold in the originals, well, you would be dead wrong. Wait, what? 3PO's right leg is actually painted silver from below the knee. But because the silver finish is incredibly reflective, in many shots it simply reflects the gold from the other leg, making it also appear gold. Fancy that. Couple this with the few low-angle shots we actually see of 3PO's legs and ankles at all, and it's easy to see why so many fans get this one wrong. Heck, some fans even go beyond the Mandela effect to suggest that George Lucas must have changed C-3PO's leg color in more recent years, which, considering all the tinkering Lucas has done with the original trilogy over the decades, actually isn't that wild a theory, but it's still totally untrue. Hilariously, the silver leg not only slid past millions of fans, but also the folks in charge of Star Wars merchandise, as the original C-3PO action figures had no hint of silver whatsoever. Cheers for tapping on this video today, my friend. Now tap on that subscribe button down below for more of this What Culture Star Wars stuff in your day. Number 5. Bombs can fall in space with some help. Because the polarizing response to The Last Jedi caused dissatisfied fans to approach every single scene with the least charitable mindset imaginable, of course we have to discuss the very concept of gravity. In the film's opening sequence, we see Paige Tico drop bombs from a ship in zero gravity. But as anyone with even a cursory understanding of physics can appreciate, this should be impossible. This prompted many fans to disparage the scene for disobeying basic science. Except that's not really the case at all. In a post-release interview, the film's visual effects supervisor, Ben Morris, clarified that he and filmmaker Ryan Johnson decided that the bombs were magnetic and launched out of the ship, ensuring they would travel downwards and hit their targets. Hate on The Last Jedi all you want, people, but in a movie about space wizards wielding laser swords, are magnetically propelled bombs really a stretch, like, at all? No, they're not. Number 4. Luke's force kick wasn't a mistake. For all of the dozens of times we've seen Return of the Jedi over the years, many fans keenly sneer at the mistake when Luke Skywalker whiffs kicking one of Jabba the Hutt's lackeys in the face while attempting to rescue Leia. As many have pointed out over the decades, Luke's foot doesn't get even close to connecting with the soldier's face. But this isn't even remotely a case of the stunt team screwing up the action beat. Storyboards for the scene confirm that Luke was always meant to kick from afar, as was later entered into Star Wars canon as a force kick, albeit more recently relegated to the Legends continuity. Sure, the actual choreography of the scene still looks pretty clumsy, but when comparing the final shot to the storyboard, they totally nailed what Lucas had in his head. Hilariously, Mark Hamill himself also couldn't resist but recently post a joking tweet about the widely celebrated, perfectly executed force kick. Never change, Mark. Number 3. ObiWan isn't an absolute hypocrite. One of the most widely memed moments from the Star Wars prequels occurs in the climax of Revenge of the Sith, when Obi-Wan tells Anakin only a Sith deals in absolutes prior to their historic battle. Many fans have relished mocking the hypocrisy of Obi-Wan's statement, that he's chiding Anakin for making an absolute statement while making one himself. And more to the point, we've heard the Jedi make absolute statements before, such as Yoda's do or do not, there is no try. But context is a thing, people, and with that in mind, there is nothing wrong with what Obi-Wan says at all. It's first important to note that Obi-Wan was replying to Anakin after he said, "If you're not with me, you are my enemy," as blunt and absolute statements as they come, and one which was entirely unbecoming of a Jedi. Secondly, Obi-Wan says deals, not speaks, a small but significant distinction, reflecting Anakin's decision to not merely speak out the decision, but strategically destroy any prospect of a middle ground between the Jedi and Sith. So get off Kenobi's back. Number 2. Luke considering killing Ben wasn't out of character. One of the more intriguing, if controversial, flourishes in The Last Jedi is the Rashomon-inspired manner in which we see 3 different accounts of the fateful night that Luke drew his lightsaber against a young Ben Solo, aka Kylo Ren. The first flashback, told by Luke, suggests that a rage-filled Kylo simply turned on his master, while the second, relayed by Kylo, claims that he acted in self-defense, after Luke activated his lightsaber out of fear of Kylo's powers. And then there's the third and presumably correct version, told by Luke to Rey, where he claims he sensed the darkness building in Kylo and instinctively drew his lightsaber, only to immediately regret it, at which point Kylo responded in self-defense. Many complained that this was a deeply out-of-character moment for Luke, that the hero of the original trilogy would never dare consider killing a Jedi student. But first and foremost, it's naive and just plain wrong to suggest that people don't massively change over the span of decades. People change change over a few years. More to the point, the original trilogy didn't exactly paint Luke as a purely squeaky clean hero either. We saw glimpses of fleeting darkness within him, such as when he snapped on Vader during their climactic fight in Return of the Jedi. And so, a moment of instinctual weakness which he instantly regretted isn't remotely inconsistent with who Luke is. It just adds further shade and dimension to his character, honestly. Number 1, Anakin's infamous sand line makes total sense. And finally, there's surely no more ridiculed line in the prequels than Anakin's infamous sand speech to Padme, where he says, "I don't like sand, it's coarse and rough and irritating and it gets everywhere." Now, are there reasons to take umbrage with this scene? Yeah, absolutely. The acting is a bit wooden and the dialogue is definitely clunky, adding up to a romantic scene that's admittedly tough not to snigger at. But Star Wars fans were so quick to jump on the bandwagon and rip this scene to shreds, many without at least appreciating the context of Anakin and Padme's conversation. It's important to remember that Anakin isn't going off on a goofy non sequitur here. He's comparing his experience with sand growing up as a slave on Tatooine to Padme's privileged childhood, where she went swimming on Naboo and let the sun dry her off while she rested on the sand. Does this mean you're wrong for smirking at the execution of the scene? Absolutely not. But for all of the context-free mockery this scene gets, it's still worth appreciating the full content of what Anakin is actually saying here, awkward though it is. In other words, leave Annie and his sand alone, people.